So hi everybody, it's Steve Napier. Welcome to the Circle of Brilliance. Today we're going to continue our exploration of negativity, positivity, and neutrality. In our prior calls, we did focus on negativity. We looked about where negativity lives on the change grid. We talked about the neurochemistry involved with negativity. We talked about how negativity can actually be a very positive thing as far as someone's growth is concerned. And we also talked about what happens when negativity becomes toxic. So today we're going to flip and we're going to look at positivity and try to answer the exact sorts of questions. So what exactly is positivity? I'll be throwing that to you guys to get your definitions of that in just a moment if you want to get your thoughts together. We will talk about the neurochemistry of positivity, the 4 different faces of positivity, what the upside and the downside are, what the positivity trap is all about, and what toxic positivity may involve. Now, I'm very happy to have Kathy and Ivan on the call because if I'm not mistaken, this is a topic that you guys just coincidentally were talking about in one of your blogs. Is that correct?
Yeah. I wrote a blog, probably 2 weeks ago on it. And it's something that I've seen a lot. I was in the military, so I can kind of reference some of that experience. And yeah, it's something that I've seen a lot of people put on this kind of brave, happy, to be frank, bullshit face, and
Yeah.
and they're like, oh, it's all good. I'm like, no, it's not. We're in a pretty crummy situation. Let's be honest about it. So yeah, so that was part of what inspired me to write that.
Excellent.
It's also a dynamic that's coming in often when leaders are having their one-on-one or team sessions with us.
Yeah. You see it a lot in social media too. So
you see a lot in social media. And by the way, there are many, many people in the world of human development, very famous people, in fact, who do a lot of research and writing on specifically on the topic of maintaining a positive mindset. In fact, I'm trying to think about long ago, wasn't there a book by Nathaniel Hawthorne or something? Trying to remember, but it was all about maintaining a positive mindset. And then I think we all know about Dr. Seligman, who's the founder or the positive psychology sort of movement. So it's been around for a really long time. And I don't want to suggest that there isn't tremendous merit in all of that work. I just want to say there's another aspect to it that deserves a look. And that's what and to me, it's when people get trapped in this positivity thing and start to believe that negativity is inherently evil and therefore must be avoided and discarded at all costs. So yeah. Okie dokie. So let's throw out the question, what exactly is positivity? How do you guys define it in your work or in your conversations with your clients? What is positivity? And they all unmute simultaneously.
I make a point to stay away from the word positivity because it's often a thin veneer. It's often way too big. It's often an umbrella term for a lot of other things and that fall up underneath it. So in fact, we teach through the Wingspan Performance System, we teach leaders to not use the word positive. You have a positive number or a negative number, sure, that's a mathematical thing. Otherwise, what we help people think about is getting more granular. Like when you say you're positive about the situation, like that could be hopeful, that could be optimistic, that could be taking a longer term view. So there's a lot of other things that kind of go inside of that. And we encourage and help people get past just positive and get into something that's far more granular and meaningful and specific.
Excellent. In the world of linguistics, positivity would be called I'm trying to remember what it's called. It's when you're treating a verb as though it's a thing. I'll remember in just a second, but positivity is not a thing. Positivity is a state of existence. And because it's a state, it's inherently temporary. So subject to change. Go ahead, Kathy.
Well, yeah, I was going to say how I would define what is positivity, exactly what you said in terms of, to me, it's a direction. Like I'm going in the direction of, and then it goes back to what Ivan just said. I'm going in the direction of, and then let's get more useful with being more descriptive.
Very good. Yeah. The word I was trying to remember was nominalization. A nominalization is anytime you treat an action, a verb, as though it was a thing. So if someone says, you don't give me any support. Well, support is not a thing. Support is an action. It's a set of verbs and related verbs. So the real question isn't, well, I'm sorry, I can't go to the cabinet and pull out a box of support for you. You got to tell me, what is it that I need to do that for you equates to supporting you or not supporting you? So we have to get it back into the verb form, back into the action to really be able to do anything with it. So same thing's true for positivity. So I think of it as it's a state of being, and because it's a state, it is inherently temporary.
I like that word state, just because for me, a lot of the idea of self-management is really about managing your nervous system. Like, I think even in medical school, like when we're talking to patients and you're asking them, how do you feel? And so they're looking at, the graph of the smiles, and they're equating 1 to 10 about how they feel, but they're really talking about the state that they're currently in. And that changes from time to time. And the neurochemistry supports that. So a lot of self-management is really paying attention to what's going on that your body picked up on. And that could be factors in the external environment, or it could be something internal. So I think that word state describes it best for me.
Yeah, and that's going to resonate, because when we talked about negativity, we said that, well, negativity is also not a thing. It is a state. It is built from attitudes, beliefs that ultimately give rise to behaviors. And as you start to move through all the different attitudes and beliefs and subsequent behaviors you could have, your neurochemistry is changing. And so how can we say
feel good and feel bad, but again, they're describing movement. And again, in the lab, when we're studying emotions, the word emoto in Latin is trigger. It means movement. So they're not studying what we call feelings, good or bad. That's the label that comes from the ABCs, the attitudes, beliefs, and commitments. But that's not the thing, right? So that's not the trigger.
Yep. All right, so anyone else want to throw anything out? All the rest of you unmute and say something. How do you go about defining positivity in the work that you do? Anybody?
This is Kathy. I'm another person who doesn't use that word very much. I don't find it particularly useful. And I think it has so many connotations. And I see too many shades of gray to use it in my work, although I think it's just one of those very popular buzzwords today.
Yep. Long ago, I had a keynote that no one ever hired me to do, called The Powerlessness of Positive Thinking. So and the whole point of the talk was, Kathy, we're getting a lot of background noise from your line. Just 1 second. The whole point of the powerlessness of positive thinking is that if the only thing you ever do is think positive thoughts, but they never compel you to take positive actions, then nothing really changed. And so I said, let's stop worrying so much about positive thinking and move more into positive actions. That doesn't suggest that having a positive framework around an issue doesn't help you see positive ways of getting to the positive outcome, but it goes back to what Kathy and Ivan were saying about it really is more about movement in the direction of whatever your desired outcome happens to be. So Boris, you've unmuted. What can you want to throw something in?
Yeah, I mean, positivity for me sounds a little bit like motivation. It's, it's kind of fleeting, right? It's the state of being in that moment, but it's not a sustainable state to be in. And I don't find it quite useful.
No. Good. So I will assume that all of us are on the same page here. It is a state, it does occur, but it's subject to change. And this is why when someone describes a person as being a positive person, it's like you want to go, well, you only know them in a subset of their complete life experiences and behaviors. So maybe if you just happen to encounter them and experience them when all of these things that you've chosen to label as positive are occurring, you may come to the false conclusion that they are somehow or another a positive person. And I threw that out on my little my little chat that I was having on the cruise, and it was interesting because I told George I spent 3 weeks on the cruise with a clinical psychologist, actually with a biomedical psychologist. So Diane actually said that people do have kind of like a base chemistry. And we talked about this before, that we're always experiencing some sort of a bowl of neurochemical soup. But we all have the kind of bowl that we wake up with and we tend to sit in front of all day long. So what is your default bowl? And Diane certainly said there are people who tend to have a lot more of the more happiness inducing sorts of neurochemicals as their baseline kind of bowl, and others have a different kind of a bowl. So those of you with the background in neurochem, who wants to open our eyes around that?
Well, she's absolutely right, because in the brain, if you, whenever a stress hormone is released, like we talk about cortisol, and cortisol gets a bad rap as being this enemy. Again, it's a product of the nervous system that picked up on something, but automatically what tends to happen is the hypothalamus and the pituitary gland, which also release hormones, is trying to balance whatever's going on. Pituitary glands, if someone have an overactive pituitary gland, you'll see they'll form a lot of oxytocin. Like they want to be reached out, they want to touch, their connection goes beyond a Zoom contact. So that's why when babies are born, there's skin to skin contact. So those things develop over time, but some just have overactive systems that are, than others.
Yeah. Now, there's also been kind of a movement that I think really came to the forefront during COVID. In fact, Linda, if you want to get ready to unmute and share, you can fill people in on this. But there's this group, very large group, international group, that talks about the importance of dose. So managing your dose. And dose is an acronym for 4 different neurochemicals. And these are the 4 neurochemicals that are most commonly associated with a sense of positive well-being, et cetera. So what do you guys think the D stands for?
Dopamine.
Dopamine. The O is?
Oxytocin.
Oxytocin. The S is? Serotonin. And the E is? Endorphins. And so I'm sure there are other neurochemicals that also get involved, and Brian could read a paper to us about the subject matter. But apparently those are the 4 neurotransmitters that you can actually influence by modifying whatever you happen to be doing at a particular moment in time. And so, Linda, you've unmuted. Do you want to tell people a little background about how you came to be aware of dose and what they do?
Right. They've actually been around for 7 years, and all around the world, at least once a month, they have these huge, or before the pandemic, huge dance parties at all these famous locations all over the world. And then cities started getting involved, and there'd be satellites, and they'd do it in their cities till it became an amazingly huge organization. And when the pandemic hit, they started doing it online, and they'd have thousands and thousands of people join them once a month. You danced for 2 hours, and they had famous people on singing, and it was just an amazing experience. And it was all about increasing your well-being. So it's all about increasing your well-being. And then you can join this organization now, and they put out 3 or 4 videos a day, depending on what you would like to add to your life. Which DOSE would you like to add that day? How are you feeling? And you can watch these videos. It's either, you're Zen and you're doing yoga, or you're dancing to some crazy song, or whatever. And so that's what they've morphed into and created.
Yeah, and Linda, if you know the link for that, you can chat it over to everybody if you want to do that, just so they can check into it. This big dance party thing that's online, it's once a month on a Saturday morning. It's free. You just kind of log in at the appointed time. And to say there are famous people doing this, that's an understatement. You've got people like Debbie Allen, who's one of the main choreographers for a lot of the dances they're doing. And they've had, I mean, Linda could rattle them all off, all these really people. You dance for 2 hours. And by the end of it, you're feeling quite upbeat and energetic and positive and all those sorts of things. Mind you, I would imagine that that's focusing on 1, maybe 2 of the dose neurochemicals, because other things they do, as Linda said, you can do a little self-awareness kind of exercise on a daily basis to determine whether or not you need a little bit more D, O, S, or E. And then they've got videos and exercises to help you enhance each one of those things without needing to go to a therapist or get a prescription for something or another. So,
every single dance party is different. Like sometimes they'll start out with 25 minutes of yoga, just some little bit of meditation and yoga. They always end with bring a picture of a loved one that you're missing. And I think they started that because of the pandemic. And then so they'd end with everybody. It was kind of it was a feel good, but a sad thing because people were missing people.
Well, but that's awakening oxytocin. Is that right, Brian? Yeah, oxytocin.
Yeah, and moving your body well, because oxytocin is, as I said, secreted in the pituitary gland, which is at the base of the brain. So you think about that part of the brain is all about doing, right? So the brain, communicates in 2 ways or 2 pathways, bottom up and top down. Bottom up, whenever you move your arm, it's literally sending a signal down the brain stem. So for us to move our body, we enact the motor cortex, and now you're moving, you're feeling good, and that creates more dopamine. And as we know, dopamine doesn't care if it's value driven or not, just wants more dopamine. So you're secreting a lot of different things by the movement. And this is where the runner's high from, the endorphins that's created from long distance runners come in. So that creates this receptors of opiates. So it creates like a morphine effect that will mask any pain. So you create a lot of things by just moving your body.
Yep. Yeah. And oxytocin is more a hormone of bonding. I know it's tightly connected with pregnancies and delivery and that sort of stuff. But overall, if we're thinking and talking about people that we miss, is that triggering some oxytocin?
Yes.
So so anyway, it's a very interesting thing, but that's where I learned about DOSE. And so Brian, or whoever else has a nice background in neurochemistry, what other neurochemicals, hormones, etc., might be associated with awakening feelings of contentment, happiness, well-being? Are there others?
There's several others, but dopamine is always seen as a reward, but it's really about the motivation as well. So remember, there's something called the dopamine prediction era reward, which says that even the anticipation of something, you can secrete the same amount of dopamine as if you actually participated in it.
All right.
So these all trigger different reactions and receptors to different neurons in the system. So it's a unique bowl that forms by the activity itself, and then what you're anticipating as some kind of reward.
And so let's then see if this is going to hold true. If we're saying that negativity can end up being a problem neurochemically. Can positivity as well? Is there such a thing as, and I already know the answers, but it'd be fun if you guys unmute and chime in. Is there a problem with too much dopamine? Is there a problem with too much oxytocin, too much serotonin, too much endorphin? So what's going on when we get, too much of any of these things?
Well, T, I'm not sure about the neurochemistry. It's not my area of expertise, but what I'm sensing from just social interaction I see happening on Facebook, and this is what kind of bothers me, is you see people that seemingly on social media are very positive, outgoing, happy in life, but the reality is quite different. And you periodically hear of somebody that just committed suicide or did something crazy. And clearly that was not on their social profile.
Right.
And so I view that as really toxic positivity. And I don't understand, what is driving that, because it seems to be much, much more prevalent besides COVID. I think there's something else besides COVID that is driving this.
Well, I'm glad you're bringing that up. When we get to the downside of positivity, one of the little notes I have here is that it can also be used as a coping strategy that may have usefulness, but may become problematic in and of itself. So go ahead, Brian, you were going to say something?
Yeah, I was going to say he's exactly spot on. That's an imbalanced system, because remember, in endorphins, and they have opiate receptors, right? So it masks pain. So think about the person that's far out grid. They're masking how they're feeling. Their risk reward threshold continues to go up. And so they're just throwing all caution out the window. And then you have to begin to just ask, okay, well, why are you doing this? What is the ultimate reward for you? What value are you creating, not just as an end product, but along the process? And when you have too much of these chemicals, now you're severing ties with the parts of your brain that helps you mediate between good or bad for you. You're closing down that system, or certainly minimizing it. So in other words, you're minimizing some of the cognition capacity for you to take that signal, which is what an emotion is something going on in the body, to appropriate it in the most effective way.
It's where you're going from positivity to delusion.
Exactly.
Well, that's a good segue then to take a look now at the change grid and say, all right, well, where do we think positivity lives on the change grid? And we're ultimately going to see if we can come up with the 4 different faces of positivity. And you can kind of consider face to be literal, because I think there are facial expressions that are going to change as we are in different locations on the change grid. And some of those facial expressions would be assessed as being a bit more positive. And again, if you want to broaden or including your definition of positive, a sense of well-being, a sense of contentment, happiness, all those sorts of things would kind of come into positivity. So good attitude, whatever else you throw in your definition. So where do you think positivity might land on the change grid? And where how might it be different depending on where it lands? While you guys are getting your thoughts together around that, I'll just remind you that when we talked about negativity, we said that extreme negativity is at the 4 powerless points and the 4 danger zones. That's where things can become very problematic. That's where things can become very toxic. And so now the question becomes, all right, well, where does positivity fit? And I asked you guys a gifted students question a couple of sessions ago. I said, what is the opposite of negativity? Does anyone remember what the answer was?
Neutrality.
Neutrality.
Yes,
Yeah, neutrality. And so where on the change grid would you find neutrality?
6-6.
Right there in the middle. Okay, so if neutrality owns the middle and negativity owns the extremes, then that means just by the process of elimination, positivity has to exist between these things, these dots. So right out here, there's a certain, is it possible for there to be a bit of outgrid positivity?
Isn't that the band of intention?
Yeah, for sure. What's that, Brad? What's Brad?
Isn't that the band right there that you're pointing out? Is that the band of intention?
Right.
Intentionality would
Yeah,
be
if we
positive.
go to the next layer, that's where intention and engagement lives. The person's in
Yeah.
power as far as their level of tension is concerned. So why might that be viewed as a very positive place for people to be? Kathy, you were about to say something, or Ivan, I saw your.
Yeah, well, I mean, when I'm out there, I can feel fulfilled, accomplished.
Right.
I mean, like, let's pull up the descriptors. I could.
Yeah, there you
I
go.
can-
Well, because this is, again, this is the driver energy. The driver wants to do what? What's the compelling motivation behind the driver energy?
Also do
Get it
things.
done.
Get it done, go somewhere. That's why we call it driver. They're headed somewhere. They're going somewhere. They want to accomplish things, get things done. And so can that be experienced as a very positive sort of a thing? Absolutely. Can it also become a very negative thing depending on the circumstances? Yeah. As we talked about last time, the person in the outgrid danger zone tends to be quite negative, but they tend to be rather negative about the people that they perceive as holding them back or not getting it in their way, whatever it is. So they denigrate others, they fight, all those kinds of outgrid, narcissistic, warmongering kinds of behaviors are all happening out there. Well, that's negativity. So somewhere it is on the continuum, positivity is going to give way to negativity. You don't go through neutrality on the way.
I would think that a lot of, like, when you're out grid and you move towards the danger zone, you start to lose sense of, you're more externally focused than internally, because internally focused will pull in the serotonin. So you'll be looking at and questioning your why. Whereas if you're too externally motivated in terms of dopamine, you're looking at you're just more concerned with what, like getting it done.
The outcome,
but
task
you're not
oriented.
qualifying the what. Exactly.
Yep. And see, that also makes sense because we know that as we move further and further in any direction, we, particularly outgrid and upgrid, we're likely to encounter higher and higher levels of dopamine and lower levels of serotonin. And so you're right, this person becomes, what do I say, hell-bent on getting their fix. And if their fix happens to be winning the deal or whatever it happens to be, then nevertheless, that's what they want out here. They want the outcome. How they get the outcome when you get this far out grid becomes less and less important. Remember, they perceive their ability as being extremely high. The challenge is also being extremely high. So there's going to be this grander than thou sort of perspective they have for themselves. They have superhero going on, so we can talk about them as much as you want, but you get the idea. So what's that transition between the positive? Like if I'm an amiable driver, I want to get to a given outcome, but who do I want to get to that outcome with?
Others.
I'm an amiable driver. I want the team to win. This is what I want to have happen. And I'm just staying straight across. I can only go from an amiable driver to a driven driver. So what happens is that I move from amiable to driven. I shed my concern for others, my appreciation for others. And so it's going to start kind of like around here. Does that resonate with you guys?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. And by the way,
a little bit upgrade.
Well, if I go a little bit up, let's do a little arc, go upgrade a little bit.
Like up there, what I'm thinking about is a person that's interested in learning. Because kind of like now I advise all these healthcare startups, right? And so I'm learning product management to help them build products that really transform healthcare, right?
Yeah.
So what acetylcholine mixed with dopamine would do is you're learning, and it put the spotlight on what you want to learn and what you need to learn. And so as you continue to do that with enough intensity and a sense of alertness, now you're building neuroplasticity, which will build even in your sleep.
Great that you're bringing that up, because one of the things we talk about more in your kind of basic training is that this area right here, I'm squiggling around kind of like the border between the expressive driver and the driven expressive, maybe even down a little bit. So we have a little bit of analytical tertiary energy thrown in there. This is the domain of actual problem solving. And sometimes people will say, well, that's creativity. Real creativity lives down grid. Creative flow, we'll talk about that in a second, but this is about problem solving. Some issue has arisen, and these energies right here believe that if we put our minds together, we should be able to figure out anything we need to figure out. And so even if I just talk about the expressive driver, doesn't that just sound like a positive mindset just by its label alone? Yeah, I mean, they're expressive. They're wanting to have a good time. They're feeling something, energized, motivated. We do say this is the domain of a great leader. And also this is one of the four subquadrants that we associated with emotional intelligence. These four right here, we thought where emotional intelligence would tend to reside. So hopefully, as you know, as we do these Circle of Brilliance calls, you guys are how do I put it? Kind of coming to an understanding of the depth of what the change grid is actually conveying, because all these things really do fit together. And as each fits together with the others, there is a deeper and deeper knowing of what's really going on with that person. So of course I could just be deluding myself because I've got too much endorphin and dopamine going on, but nevertheless, there it is on there. So I do believe that, yeah, we could feel positivity, whatever that is, up here as well. What about the person who's downgraded slightly, still be in power, but what about the analytical driver who's maybe up a little bit, the expressive analytical driver energy? Does that feel like it's a place where you're going to encounter positivity, and what might that look and feel like?
I think positivity could reside there, but it would be very organized. Because it's kind of like they say how you always hear this about left brain, right brain, and right brain speaks in pictures and left brain doesn't. The left brain can speak in pictures, but whatever it does there, everything's very detailed, organized, sequential, because it processes data and information uniquely different than the right brain.
Yeah.
The right brain is free form, so it operates like 10 times faster. That's why our emotions, we can process it immediately, whereas cognition takes some time to power up and power down. We need focus, we need attention there. So I imagine it'd be very kind of narrow perspective,
perhaps more so narrow. And I think it's also going to be, well, it's not very expressive, so I think it's going to be a quieter kind of thing. Go ahead, Kathy.
Yeah, I was going to say very internal, and it depends on the person's intention and preference even, because someone who really in that moment wants to be perhaps intellectually stimulated, then they view it as quite positive.
Right. And in fact, this should resonate very much with your and Ivan's practice. For those who don't know, they seem to be doing a lot of work with more technical kinds of types.
Yes.
And so the technical types, when they solve a problem or create something new and wonderful, they have an excited moment. But that excited moment is not going to be what an expressive driver's idea of
internal.
Right. It's like, hey, good for us. That's really wonderful. And that's a perfect thing, because how many of you would like to have put expressive drivers in charge of finding a vaccine for COVID? No, give me these analytical drivers, get it done, but do it right.
Yeah.
So then we can get excited. So still, this is a very positive kind of thing. And even the driven driver, they have an area where that is positively positive as opposed to giving way to negativity. It's just here, I think we're right here where I'm squiggling around. I think we're looking at a place where transition is likely to occur. So, someone who's at 10-10, if we pulled up the adjective map, a lot of very, very good qualities we tend to associate with leadership land right there. But simultaneously, there also lies a bunch of other things that start to be a bit more problematic. Like they tend to become judgmental there because they're running out of time to make a decision. So the time for discussing and debating and being collaborative, we've just run out of time. Someone sooner or later has to just make a decision and do whatever it is that needs to be done. Okay, yeah, go right ahead, Boris.
What's coming to mind for me a little bit is the individual we were just talking about that's more process driven. That individual is more fixed in their mindset, right? They have to go through the process to come up with their conclusions and how they see things, as opposed to somebody that's more upgrid and flexible and can move around.
That's
so
right.
having a team of people that are working on something with those varying dynamics can be quite useful.
Absolutely.
Because they lose the innovation from the person that's down grid that just, is set on their path. They have to go through the process.
That's correct. That's correct. And that's why, there's a lot of profiles out there, like the Ambassador is the first one came to mind, but there are several others that just basically say, if we really want to do a good job as a team, we need to make sure that that team is populated by people who bring, most of those models are quadrant based, all four of these energies that they're talking about. Because if they're all just that, whatever their equivalent of a driven driver energy is all about, that's not going to produce the outcome. Where if they're all analytical drivers, well, there's not going to be any sense of urgency around doing much of anything. It's all about doing things well and methodically, because to be an analytical driver, you've been trained to be very disciplined and methodical in your way of operating. The expressive driver wants to have a good time and be open and participative and all those kinds of things. And the amiable driver energy just wants to make sure that people are always being factored in, the people that are here, the people this is going to affect, they're a little bit more, and they tend to be more concerned about ongoing operational issues as well. How is this going to be managed? Who's going to be managing it? So they're asking a lot of questions. So to Boris's point, all four of those energies really do need to be present. And it's unlikely that anyone's going to be on your team who can do all four in equal balance and do them well. So people all have their preference. Yep.
And that's really the passion I would have when somebody says diversity. That's the passion I'm talking about, the diversity of the teams.
That's right.
Not the traditional thought of when you say diversity to people.
Right. And so, just to kind of stick to our little thing here about what are the four faces of positivity, can you guys in your mind's eye kind of create the facial expressions that you would expect to find in someone who is in this outgrid quadrant, along power, intentional, engaged, executing on tasks? That's a very different facial expression than if I said, let's look at the face of positivity that might be happening upgrid. And by the way, we even go in between. If I want to, I could give you a whole map of facial expressions that go all the way around that green line, right on the green line, or between the green and the red. There's a wide range, because positivity can be found in all of these areas of the change grid. Okay, so what do you think? What's a facial expression we might encounter in someone who's a bit upgrid? Forget danger zone, they're just upgrid, power stress.
Lots of laughter.
Lots of laughter, yeah. I mean, because we know they're expressive. So what are they expressing? They will be expressing whatever those positive feelings are, those positive thoughts that could give rise to happiness, and smiles and laughter. What else might you find up there a little bit? All right, I'll throw it out. Nervous energy. So they might be having a lot more eye movements going around, maybe a lot more head movements, being more animated in their gestures. A lot more body language might be happening up there that indicates they've got a lot of tension that's going on. It's not bad tension, but nevertheless, that tension is still there. The thing that I always use as my kind of like hallmark example of what a positive upgrid energy, an expressive energy would really be all about is going somewhere that you love going, or going somewhere you've always wanted to go. So how many of you are Disney fans? Yep. Anybody a Disney fan? Oh, please say yes, so I'm not the only one.
Sure.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
Okay. Brian, have you been to Disney?
Yes, I actually trained there.
Okay. Did you have a perfectly decent time?
No.
All righty then. So, other than Brian, the rest of us, if we go back, do you just kind of like walk into Disneyland like you're walking into Walmart, or Disney World like you're walking into Walmart? Or do you walk in with a little bit more skip in your step and anticipation of great things to happen that day? You know, you tell me, what's the energy around someone who really enjoys going to Disney?
Excitement.
You're
Yeah.
excited. You're
And the
excited.
anticipation, right? Which is the word I was thinking, T. The
Mhm.
anticipation of having a wonderful time.
That's right, because you've been looking forward to it. You're all this sort of, in fact, Linda and I often have a debate. Linda is someone, I'll throw this out as a question, then I'll give our answers to it. But how many of you would rather be surprised by something, and how many would rather look forward to it? So Linda is someone who loves to be surprised. Okay. I am someone who loves to look forward to something. So if you wait until the last minute to let me know that something that I'm going to love is about to happen, trying to surprise me, I will be surprised and I'll be appreciative, but nowhere near what I would have felt if you had told me from the very beginning that this is going to be happening, because that I'm still surprised in the moment that you informed me. And now I've got all this time to anticipate it and think about it, and the excitement to build and build and build, to the point that on the day we actually go do it, don't be surprised if I don't have a tear in my eye when we walk through the gates or get aboard the ship or whatever the case may be. I'm someone who loves to look forward to something. And while I won't turn down a surprise, I would say to you, I would much rather be given the opportunity to look forward to it than be surprised by it. On the other hand, Linda, feel free to unmute yourself. Linda loves to be surprised. Anybody else love to be surprised? Yeah, there you go, Linda, go ahead.
I think it's, I don't know. I mean, it's great to look forward to something, but I don't really get too excited about doing something until just before it. But if I'm surprised, there's that like rush of, oh my God, this is so cool. Oh my God, you know. So I just like being surprised.
There you go.
He described exactly why I responded the way I responded, although I'm a resident of Florida, because it was overwhelming for me all at once. And I was just like, okay, yeah, whatever. So I just didn't have that same feeling that everyone else.
So you don't own a pair of mouse ears that say Brian on the back of them?
No. Like I said, I did training with Disney Institute. I talked about the Jim Lear has his Human Performance Institute where he teaches professional athletes how to manage energies nearby. So we did training there. And I just, unlike everything else, when you live in an area, you like underappreciate it and undervalue it, really, because it's there.
Yeah.
It's there every day.
Yeah. So it's not quite as special. There you go. So anybody else want to chime in? Who likes surprises? Who likes looking forward to things? Anybody? Kathy and Ivan, are you guys on the same page with surprises and looking forward or not?
No, we're like you and Linda. I'm like Linda. I like being surprised. And what she said, like, it's usually, I'm usually so focused on other stuff. It's not until right before. And I do like that rush. And
I'm at the other end. I like knowing something's coming and being able to play with it and think about it. And ooh, what do I want to do when I get to this piece? Or how do I want to?
Exactly.
Yeah.
I'll have a spreadsheet done by the time we leave.
Oh, he will. Just one.
Yeah, exactly. Well, no. It depends. They have to have contingency plans, right? The weather and all that kind of stuff. Well, let me tell you, on behalf of everyone who by nature likes to look forward to things, surprising someone else is not our default. Our default is to let you know so you can get excited along with it. Otherwise, you are placing a rather tremendous burden on us. And that burden is that, number one, we have to keep it secret, but we're excited because we are anticipating it. And the other thing is that, which is perhaps even more problematic, is we have no way of knowing what kind of surprise you're actually going to be upset by instead of thrilled by. I'll give you an example. How would you feel if I said to you, we get out of bed first thing in the morning, I say to you, pack your bag, we're going to Aruba. How many of you would have gone like, you need to give me notice for something like that?
Yep.
Right, Kathy?
No, I'd be ready to go. Like,
All right, good.
yeah.
So T, let me throw this out there. Is there anything here regarding gender? Because I'm like you, I hate surprises actually. I want to know ahead of time what's going to happen. And I bet you my wife would tell me that she loves surprises. So
No, I would imagine it's probably not tied so much to gender per se as the way people have been, the culture, society has kind of positioned things. I mean, look, when you're watching commercials about jewelry stores, they never show you a commercial of the gal surprising the guy with an engagement ring. Look, there's never, that's never done. And so I got to believe more than anything else, it's probably more about conditioning than it is about physical characteristics that would do that. Do you guys agree with that? That it's probably more about how we've all been raised more than something about our biology? Yeah.
It's interesting because it ties in with something I've been I'm listening to the Audible book by Lisa Feldman Barrett about how emotions are made, and she talks about that when we do so much anticipating and basically forecasting of what's going to happen, simulating what's going to happen. And so it could be interesting how some people, when they're younger, anticipate or simulate certain things, don't get it, and then they begin to think, well, surprises stink. And I'm guessing here, I mean, other people are far more qualified on this call to answer this. So I'm wondering like where people might see that kind of experience growing up with surprises being, hey, I love this, or surprises being that didn't go the way I wanted.
Right.
How that might shape our thoughts about that.
Yeah. See, that's interesting because now, getting back to the face of it, I believe both of those situations still live in this positive part of being upgrid. So whether I'm surprised in the moment, so I was just, going on about life beforehand. Now I'm surprised. Well, I definitely moved up grid and I'm sure I've got a smile on my face. And now I'm having a lot more physical movements because I got to go do something or whatever. Obviously the surprise has to be, dealt with, whether I'm unwrapping something or throwing stuff in a suitcase. So I can see that. And honestly, if I am looking forward to something, I'm up here, but I'm up here for a much more sustained period of time than the surprise scenario might have created. But I think in both cases, that still, this is the energy, this is the place. All right, you guys agree with that? Yep. Yeah. All right. So let's take a look on the in-grid side of things. Again, don't be in the danger zone, but if we're slightly in-grid, we're more of that amiable, predominant energy, maybe even a bit of a driven amiable to stay along the heart line, a driven amiable. What might that face of happiness look like? And what's the happiness? Why we're using happiness instead of positivity? That tells you something right there, doesn't it? So what might be my positive thoughts, beliefs, attitudes, behaviors that I would encounter here? What's that face of positivity look like?
That would seem to have a high level of encouraging because it's about connecting with other people and helping them perhaps to feel better about a situation.
Yep. Other thoughts you want to throw out, anybody? Okay, I'll share with you that this is the positivity that is associated with giving something. So this is the volunteer energy, the knowing that you're helping some other group of people, supporting friends and family, et cetera. Even if you don't have enough ability to actually help them tackle the giant challenge, you're there in moral support, energizing them, et cetera. And so that to me feels like positivity with a very higher dose of oxytocin. Brian, does that resonate? We never looked where oxytocin lives on the change grid, but I'm going to believe it resonates very much with the amiable energy.
I would say so.
Yeah. And so I think that that's slightly different I keep saying facial expression, but it's beyond that. Is that when I talk about the different face of something, there's also an energy behind it. This energy of positivity is different than the up-grid energy of positivity, and that's different than the out-grid energy of positivity. Are we all in agreement on that?
Yeah, so
Yet
the in-grid would be something like that connecting like purpose, something like.
Yeah. Mission, purpose, vision. Mhm.
Yeah, I
T,
was thinking,
for some reason, T, for me, that one, as you were saying about facial expressions, it seems to me that that one is more inward. Earlier, Brian was talking about the influence internally and externally. And for me, it seems like for that particular stage of the grid, it may not be so physical, so that the energy may be more inward for that individual.
Yeah, I think that's a great observation. If we talk about how people upgrade are smiling and laughing, why do I think this person has just got the corners of their mouth turned up a little bit and a very quiet chuckle, might be going on. They're not as demonstrative because it is this, and anyone with this kind of energy going on, they're volunteering or they're supporting others, not because they're looking for any particular recognition, accolade. They're not looking for that. They're just looking to see if they can make a difference for that person, that impact on other people. Yeah. And so it is a different energy. It expresses itself in a different way. And that's why, again, the reason why we're doing this is to show that, if anything, positivity is a very large area of possibilities on the change grid, because it can express itself in so many different ways, and we can encounter it in so many different scenarios. So with just 2 minutes left to go, let's see if we can at least finish the one that's down grid a little bit. So now we're getting more into power apathy and touching into apathy. Certainly this is the analytical energy. If we look at there's still an awareness, there's still an intention. But in all likelihood, and again, from your basic training, this is where problems have been solved kind of resides. So what's that happiness feel like, look like, sound like? What's that all about?
Satisfaction.
Satisfaction. There you go. The job is done. Whatever needed to be solved has been solved. We can cross things off of our list. That's what this is all about. This is where contentment kinds of lives, where things have been squared away. So we got countless different phrases to express it. But going to Tim's point, I think this is also a quiet happiness or a quiet positivity that's coming along. They got to be downgraded before they start telling you, I told you so. But in here, they're kind of going like, hey, we did it. It's done. I'm content.
So T, where would you see the folks who tend to be, and this is what I think of as part of one of the parts of toxic positivity, is when folks who are they don't understand the situation for what it is, or they're overly like, oh, we can do it. And it's like, dude, that's really unrealistic. And like they're not paying attention to the situation. To me, that seemed to be this downgrade area, though, where because that's different than what you described. So where would you?
It could be very different. I would suggest to you that when we start looking at toxic positivity or toxic negativity, people are using it as a way to hide themselves from whatever the truth really is. And so if they're saying like, oh no, everything is really, really just fine, they may be doing their best to appear as though they're downgrid, but truth be told, they're very far upgrid. So they're frightened by whatever's going on, but one of their ways of coping is to deny the existence of the problem. Remember that the 4 danger zones are all physically adjacent to one another. And so I think that's it. So in the advanced change works, you learn that stress is not the highest level of tension. The highest level of tension is apparent apathy. And the lowest level of tension isn't apathy, it's apparent stress. So the one we encounter more often than not is apparent apathy, where the person is so stressed out by whatever is going on, physically they collapse. They are immobilized. If I just look at them, that's what we say it, apparent. They appear to be in apathy because they're not doing anything. They're not saying anything. No, they're catatonic and frozen in fear. or whatever it is. And so you start to engage them in dialogue. And one of the things they're very likely to do is say, it'll all take care of itself. We don't have anything to worry about. It's in the hands of God, whatever they kind of want to do to basically say, I'm doing my very best to appear or convince myself that my ability is greater and the challenge is less. But unfortunately, there's only on the entire change grid, there's one word that appears superficially to be in all 4 locations, when in fact it really is just the word that appears right there in the exact center of every one of these dots. And that word is, I think Brian might have just said it, delusional. So delusion is in all of these extremes. So yeah, but that's a long answer to your point, Ivan, is that a lot of times toxic positivity is a way of hiding from the truth.
That's awesome. Thank you.
Or hiding from the truth if it's with yourself, if it's with others. So if you're sharing something with me that is really challenging, heartbreaking, something, and I'm expressing that toxic positivity, that can be because I perceive my own ability to support you, really, my ability really low. Like I just don't
right. Yep.
Yeah. And the challenge to be very high.
Yep. And so in both cases, whoever is operating under an either intentional or unintentional distortion of reality. So that's really interesting. So that's where we'll pick up on Tuesday. Now, obviously, we won't be having a call next Thursday because it's Thanksgiving. But Tuesday, let's see what we can do to get some of these other thoughts about positivity coming up to play. I'll be very curious to hear what you guys think about the positivity trap and toxic positivity. I'll share definitions of those that I've been able to find, but I'll be very curious to know what is the dark side of positivity. Okay.
What I want to talk about the most, because I took that Strengths Finders test, and one of the, I think that was my top that said positivity. So, and I'm always known for finding a way out of things, like thinking in a unique way.
Right, but Brian, let me just chime in and say, you, in just the way you first phrased it, you said, I'm always finding a way out of something. Even in that statement, you define that there is something you need to find a way out of. Right? And so that to me sounds very positive. But yeah. Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah. But I guess I'm interested in that because of the label itself. Like I don't, you know what I mean? Like it's not what I would describe as positive. Like I'm always interested behaviorally what's underneath it.
Yeah. Just someone who truly suffers from toxic positivity would deny the existence of anything to get out of. They wouldn't be able to see it, or they wouldn't acknowledge it at all. So that can become a real problem. Totally different thing. Yep. Okay, anyway, we'll talk about that on our next call. Hopefully you guys can all join in. So thank you all very much. Have a lovely weekend. We'll talk again soon. Bye, everybody.
Thanks.
Bye, everybody. Bye, everyone.